module now on por and para. This is part 1. There are 2 words in Spanish for the word for. We have por and we have para. For example, I went to the shop for milk. It's a gift for my mother. So here we have 2 separate sentences, and in English, we're using the word for in both of them. However, in Spanish, one of these sentences will use para and the other one will use por. So we would have fui a la tienda por leche. I went to the store for milk. And below we have es un regalo para mi mamá. So it's a present for my mom. Now this means that whenever we come across the word for in English, we're going to need to make a decision between por and para in Spanish. Now, most of the time, only one of those choices will be correct. However, sometimes both will be correct grammatically, but the meaning will change. So the purpose of this module is to give you some solid guidelines that will enable you to choose correctly between both options. Let's begin by talking about para. Now there are 2 main uses for this word in Spanish. The first one we're already quite familiar with. It's where we get this meaning of in order to. So, for example, if we have I did it to help you, this to, let's underline it here, implies I did it in order to help you. In that sense, we would always throw in para. So we would have lo hice para ayudarte. So this is one of the major or principal uses of para in Spanish. Another one, however, is for this idea of receiving or being in receipt of something. A simple example is it's for me. So here we have this idea of something being for me, meaning that I'm going to receive or I am in receipt of it. So we would have es para mí. Another example could be the coffee is for my sister. So we would have el café es para mi hermana. So my sister is the one that is going to receive or is in receipt of this coffee. Now this idea of receiving is not limited to just people. It can be also for inanimate objects. For example, water is good for the plants. So you would have el agua es buena para las plantas. The idea here is that the plants are in receipt of this water. In each case so far, you can see that there is something or someone receiving something. Another example of that could be exercise is good for my body. So we would have el ejercicio es bueno para mi cuerpo. The idea being that my body is now receiving the benefit of this exercise. Going back to people again, we could have a simple example like I bought a present for you. How would you say that? Compré un regalo para ti. So you, or this person, is going to be or going to receive this present. Putting those examples all on one slide, you can see all the way down the line, we have this idea of receiving something. It's for me. The coffee is for my sister. Water is good for the plants. I bought a present for you. Exercise is good for my body. In each case, it's going to be para because we have something or someone receiving. Now, aside from those 2 main uses, meaning number 1, this idea of in order to, and number 2, the idea of receiving something, we also have secondary uses with para, and we're going to go through them now. Para is also used a lot for deadlines. For example, it's going to be ready for or by tomorrow. This word here of tomorrow is acting as a deadline. So this is your clue for using para here. How would you translate that? Va a estar listo para mañana. Next up we have it's going to be here for or by 2 o'clock. Here again, 2 o'clock is acting as a deadline. And in Spanish, they would simply express this as las dos. So again, how would you translate? Va a estar aquí para las dos. Now, occasions such as birthday, an anniversary, a holiday, will also be treated as deadlines with the use of para. For example, what do you want for your birthday? Birthday in Spanish is actually plural, cumple años. So again, how would you translate this? ¿Qué quieres para tu cumpleaños? Here we have your birthday acting as the deadline. So for is going to be para. Let's try one more. It's for next week. How would you translate? Es para la próxima semana. Again, putting them all on one slide, we have this idea of being ready, say for or by tomorrow, being here by 2 o'clock. What do you want for this deadline, your birthday? Or what is going to happen next week? So again, all of these will use para in Spanish. Another secondary use comes in with destinations. So we could have the train for Madrid leaves soon. Now the verb to go out here will also be used for this idea of leaving when a train leaves or a plane leaves, a bus leaves. Very often you'll hear them using the verb salir. So here obviously we have our destination of Madrid. So for Madrid. This means that for will be para. So try to translate. We would have the train for Madrid leaves soon. El tren para Madrid sale pronto. Another one might be the flight for New York leaves in 1 hour. The flight in Spanish would be el vuelo, and New York would be Nueva York. So, how would you say that? El vuelo para Nueva York sale en 1 hora. Here again we have our destination of New York. So, for will become para. Another secondary use is with this idea of employment. So, I work for my father. This idea of employment. So, how would you translate? Trabajo para mi papá. She works for a big company. Trabaja para una gran empresa. Also as a question, do you work for him? ¿Trabajas para él? So again, it doesn't matter if it's working for a person or for a company. You're going to use para with this idea of employment. Now we can also use para when it comes to comparisons. So an example would be, it's very cheap for a Rolex. So the idea is that Rolex has this identity of being an expensive brand. But this watch, say that we're looking at, is very cheap. So considering that it's a Rolex, it's very cheap. So when you get this idea of a comparison, that on one side it's very cheap, but on the other side it's an expensive brand, this will also trigger the use of para in Spanish. So, how would you translate that? Es muy barato para un Rolex. Another example could be, she speaks English very well for a foreigner. Here again, we're making a comparison that she's a foreigner, but despite that, she speaks English very well. So this here, this for, will be para in Spanish. Again, try to translate it. Habla inglés muy bien para una extranjera. Now there's one more use of para that we need to look at, which is this idea of used for. So the question that comes into your mind is, what is it for, or what is it used for? For example, it's a cream for your hands. So here we have a cream, and it's for your hands, or it's being used for your hands. Whenever you get this feeling with for, you're going to use para in Spanish. So how would you translate it? Es una crema para las manos. What about this cable is for the printer? Now, cable was in level 1 as one of our cognates. It's cable. And again, you can see that, well, we're talking about the cable, but what is it for? What is it used for? Well, it's used for the printer. This is your key to use para. How would you translate it? Este cable es para la impresora. What about this? This key is for that door. Esta llave es para esa puerta. So this is what this key is for, or what it's used for. Es para esa puerta. In closing then, with para, we have our two main uses. Number one is this idea of in order to, and the idea of receiving. Now, secondary uses, the list is a bit longer. We have deadlines, destinations, employment, comparisons, and what is something for, or what is it used for. To help you remember these, I have included both these primary and secondary uses on the cheat sheet to print out. In part 2, we'll switch our attention over to por, which can of course mean for, but it also means many other things as well. In fact, it's one of the most powerful little words in all of Spanish. To begin with, I'd like to talk about this idea of because of or out of. So whenever you see or think of these in English, it's a really big clue that you're going to be using the word por to express that idea in Spanish. For example, we didn't go because of the rain. Here you can clearly see this phrase of because of, which means that you're going to use por. Now, the word for rain in Spanish is lluvia. This has a strong J sound. And let's extend it a little bit. Let's say that we didn't go to the beach because of the rain. So, how would you translate it? No fuimos a la playa por la lluvia. Another example might be I did it for love, which you could also express as I did it out of love, I did it because of love. In each case, love is the reason why I did it. Now again, these are all very strong signals for the use of por in Spanish. So how would you translate it? Any one of these will be the same in Spanish. Lo hice por amor. What about this one? I went to the store for milk. Now, while you can't really say, I went to the store out of milk or because of milk, the idea here is that milk is the reason why you went to the store. So this is why we have to include this idea of something being the reason why you did this. So again, try to translate. Fui a la tienda por leche. The poem was written for her. I guess you could also say the poem was written because of her. But the central idea is the same, is that she is the reason, the inspiration behind this poem being written. So again, this is a very strong signal for the use of por in Spanish. We'll translate this together because I have something else to tell you about it. So it could be el poema fue escrito por ella. So because of her, she's the reason why this poem was written. So por adds or acts as the connector here. However, in the introduction of this module, I said that sometimes both por and para can be grammatically correct, but they will mean different things. And here we have an example of that, because it would also be correct to say el poema fue escrito para ella. Now, the difference in how you will be understood by a native Spanish speaker is quite clear. In this sense, using por, they will understand it that she's the reason why, the inspiration behind this poem being written. Okay, so the poem was written because of her or for her. However, with para, remember we have this very strong idea of receiving something. So here, if you were to use para, what they would visualize is that she is literally receiving, you're handing this poem that you wrote to her. So she may not necessarily be the inspiration behind it. This poem could be about something completely different that has nothing to do with her. But it was written and given, let's say, as a present to her. So again, both are grammatically correct, but they will be understood in different ways by native Spanish speakers. It's the difference between por and para in this example. Next up, we have something that is clearer. So it's because of the cold. Whatever is happening, it's because of the cold. And you can clearly see that we have the phrase of because of. So right away, you're going to use por in Spanish. How would you translate? Es por el frío. So it's for the cold, it's because of the cold. What about this one? I did it out of jealousy. Now here we have out of, so it doesn't matter if it's because of or out of. Spanish will handle both of these with por. And the word for jealousy is envidia. Reminds you a little bit of the word envy. So how would you say this? Lo hice por envidia. Notice again that we also have this central idea of the reason why. So this envy is the reason why I did this. Another important and central use of the word por is with substitution or exchanges. And again, I'd like to compare the use of por and para in the same phrase here. So we could have lo compré para ti or lo compré por ti. Both are grammatically correct in Spanish, but their implied meanings are different, or how you will be understood is different. In this first one, we have a strong idea with para of receiving. So you bought this, and then the person is visualizing you giving it. Okay, so you are receiving this. However, with por, the feeling is that we have a substitution happening, meaning that you weren't able to do this, so I bought it instead. This is what will be visualized by the listener. So again, with para, they're visualizing that. So I bought this and I'm giving it to you. You are receiving this thing that I bought. With this one, what they're visualizing is that you or the person could not buy it. Therefore, I bought it instead. And this is what, or the feeling that por is implying, this idea of substitution. Let's extend this idea now. So we could have, I couldn't buy it, so my friend bought it for me. Of course, instead of for, you could also say instead of me. How would you translate it? It would be, no pude comprarlo, así que mi amigo or mi amiga lo compró por mí. With this sentence, we're painting the scene more clearly, that it was something I couldn't do. Either I didn't have the money to do it, or I didn't have the time or the opportunity to do it. So therefore, my friend did it instead. There's a substitution. Instead of me, it's my friend. That's why you'll have this idea of por instead of para. Another example could be, I asked him for you. Again, we have this feeling of substitution. Instead of you asking him, I did it instead. I did it for you instead of you. So in Spanish, this will create the need for por here. We would have le pregunté por ti. So to him, I asked for you, por ti. Now I mentioned, or in the slide above, let me see if I can find it again, that in this section we have a use of substitution, but also of exchanges. So I'm going to give you an example of exchanges now. We could have a sentence like, I'll give you $100 for the watch. This is an exchange. I'm offering you $100 in exchange for the watch. So in Spanish, this would be, te daré $100 por el reloj. Now here I'm using, or I'm conjugating into the future, which is something we haven't done in the course yet. That's coming up in level 8 or 9. But for our example, we'll just try to ignore this fact and look at the reason for using it with por. So this is what our focus is on, the idea of exchange. So, te daré, I will give you $100 for the watch. This is being implied as in exchange for. So when you can substitute this idea of in exchange for, means that it's highly likely that you're going to use the word por in Spanish. This one, he paid $10 for the shirt. So we have an exchange here, $10 in exchange for the shirt. How would you translate it? Pagó $10 por la camisa. So not para la camisa. Straight away, if you hold on or latch on to this idea of para being equal to for in Spanish, you'll find yourself making a lot of mistakes. You have to judge each case on its own merits. Are you going to go with por or para? Now, because we have this idea of in exchange for, puts us into the por side. So, pagó $10 por la camisa. What about this one? What can you give me for it? Of course, you could also say, what could you give me in exchange for it? Translating this, we would have, ¿qué puedes darme por él o por ella? If we were referring to a masculine noun, we would say por él, meaning for it. But if it was a feminine noun, we would say por ella, So, ¿qué puedes darme por él or por ella? Next up, I'm going to give you an example of where it can be quite easy, or why it can be quite easy to make mistakes even if you're at an advanced level in Spanish. We could have a sentence like, they replaced it with concrete. Now here we have no mention of the word for. We just have this idea of an exchange or a kind of a substitution. So instead of this thing, they replaced it, exchanged it, or substituted it with concrete. So this means that we can pretty much ignore the idea of with altogether. For example, the verb to replace in Spanish is reemplazar. Reemplazar. And if you said lo reemplazaron, so they replaced it con concreto, this con would be wrong. It's obviously very tempting to do that because you are clearly seeing or thinking in your mind the word with. So automatically we go with con. However, Spanish would actually use por. So lo reemplazaron por concreto. The idea is por is expressing this idea of a substitution or an exchange. So in exchange for this thing, it got replaced for concrete. You can see from this example just how powerful this idea of this use of exchange or substitution and por expressing that actually is in Spanish. So again, we have our main uses. The first one is this idea of being for, because of, out of, meaning the reason why. And then the second main use will be this idea of substitution or instead of. Now, just like para, we also have minor uses or secondary uses for the word por. So this is what we're going to look at next. The word along will frequently be translated as por in Spanish. So I walked along the road. Knowing that this will be por, how would you say it? Caminé por la calle. So I walked along the street or the road. Remember that I told you por can and is used for, but also many other little words, which is what makes it so powerful. This is an example of that. You could also have, say, I ran along the beach. Now the verb to run is correr. So how would you say I ran along the beach? Corrí por la playa. Another secondary use is with this idea of thank you. And this acts as a kind of set phrase in Spanish. So you will have gracias por followed by a full verb. For example, thanks for helping me. This would be gracias por ayudarme. Here we have thanks for, gracias por, it's always por, it's never para. And if you're going to use a verb, helping me, thanks for being here, thanks for doing that, thanks for listening to me, thanks for calling, it will always be the full verb. So again, it's like a formula. Gracias por ayudarme. How would you say this? Thanks for visiting us. Gracias por visitarnos. Thanks for being here. Gracias por estar aquí. Now you can also use it with nouns. For example, the loan would be el préstamo. Notice we don't say préstamo. The accent is not here. The stress in the word does not come here. It's at here over the E. So préstamo. How would you say that? Thanks for the loan. Gracias por el préstamo. Something else that is very common is durations of time. So you could have, I study every night for 3 hours. Here we have the word for, followed by a duration of time. So this will be por. How would you translate it? Estudio todas las noches por 3 horas. If you said estudio cada noche, that is also correct. But it would mean, instead of every night, cada noche would mean each night. So I study each night for 3 hours. Here we have another example of time with, or a duration of time with 1 week. So we are here for 1 week. How would you say it? Estamos aquí por una semana. Here's your duration of time. So for will be por. Even something like this. For how long? ¿Por cuánto tiempo? Again, how long is implying a duration of time. So instead of para, you will say por. ¿Por cuánto tiempo? You'll also frequently see por being used with maths and numbers, units of measure. For example, something simple like 3 times 3 equals 9. Now, to express this times, you will use por. And this equal sign would be es igual a. Literally, it is equal to, es igual a. So the full phrase to say this in Spanish would be 3 por 3 es igual a 9. Let's go back to just the number version here. So 3 por 3 es igual a 9 is equal to 9. Something else like 90 kilometers per hour. To express this, Spanish will use por. 90 kilómetros por hora. How would you say the speed limit is 90 kilometers per hour? This up here, let's see if you can remember it. It would be el límite de velocidad. So the limit of speed, el límite de velocidad. Try to translate. El límite de velocidad es 90 kilómetros por hora. Also expressions like this, 2 times a week. So this would be 2 veces por semana. The por here will substitute for, instead of a week, it might be 2 times per week, right? So 2 veces por semana. Another duration of time or a feeling of it could be in a phrase like for the last time, for the first time, and again you will use por in all of these. Now Spanish won't actually include the word the in this. It will simply say for first time. How would you say it? Por primera vez. The same will be true for this example. So for the last time, they would say for last time. Try to do it. Por última vez. The time would be la vez. So instead of último, you will have última. So por última vez. The last example in this section would be something like 100 grams per liter. This per, just the same as per hour, will be por in Spanish. So you would express it as 100 gramos por litro. So going back to our lead slide of this section, we're talking about maths, numbers, units of measure, first time, last time, all those types of things. Spanish will go into por. You can see just how powerful a word por actually is in Spanish. Now the last use of por that we'll look at for this video is this idea of done by, or who's the author of it, authored by. Now here's a quick tip for you. If we have something like a book by Hemingway, when you see by on its own, you will use de in Spanish. So it would be un libro de Hemingway. However, if this idea was extended to a book written by Hemingway, this is where you will use por. So it would become un libro escrito por Hemingway. Another example could be, say, a dress by Versace. So here we have just by on its own. Therefore, this will be de. So we have un vestido de Versace. However, a dress designed by Versace, this will now change to por. Again, you can see just how easy it is to trip up with these little details in Spanish. So it would become un vestido diseñado por Versace. So if you have by on its own, it's simple, use de. However, if this idea gets extended, remember we're talking about author. Who's the author or who's it by? So written by, designed by, filmed by, recorded by, painted by. Whenever you extend this idea of by with something else, this is when it will turn into por. Now, aside from these examples, and I'm sure already you can get an idea of just how useful, how versatile the word por is in Spanish, we also have lots more besides this. So you could have phrases such as por la tarde, por la mañana, por la noche. This would mean kind of in and around the evening time, during, in and around the morning time, in and around the night time. You could also have things like por ejemplo, for example. Por favor, obviously, is please. Por Dios has a meaning of like, oh, for God's sake. Ay, por Dios. And then por supuesto means of course. And por fin would mean like at last or finally. Ay, por fin estás aquí. Oh, at last you're here. Then of course we can have other phrases like por allí or por aquí. Over here, over there. So it's a really powerful little word in Spanish. And if you know or you get used to how to use it correctly, you'll find that it helps you to express a lot of useful things. Next, what I'd like you to do is print out the cheat sheet if you haven't done already, and then go through the drill with Elena. Feel free to refer back to that sheet during the drill, but obviously the ideal thing is to be able to go through the drill without needing to look at that preparation sheet so that you can just do it on your own. There's 75 questions in that drill, and it will give you a pretty good idea if you have understood when and how to use por and para.
Por and para. 75 questions. Do you have ice for the drinks? ¿Tienes hielo para las bebidas? 2 times 2 equals 4. 2 por 2 es igual a 4. I spoke with her for the first time yesterday. Hablé con ella por primera vez ayer. She's quite good for a beginner. Es bastante buena para ser una principiante. This course is for beginners. Este curso es para principiantes. You should have it by tomorrow. Deberías tenerlo para mañana. We're going to change it for something more modern. Vamos a cambiarlo por algo más moderno. I don't have time. Can you do it for me? No tengo tiempo. ¿Puedes hacerlo por mí? They did it out of jealousy. Lo hicieron por celos. He used to work for me. Trabajaba para mí. We have a gift for you. Tenemos un regalo para ti. We leave for Spain tomorrow. Salimos para España mañana. How many can I buy for $10? ¿Cuántos puedo comprar por $10? It's a letter for my sister. Es una carta para mi hermana. An apple for an orange. Una manzana por una naranja. The house was sold for 1 million pesos. La casa fue vendida por 1 millón de pesos. You must be here for 10 o'clock. Tienes que estar aquí para las 10. The water you see is because of the leak above. El agua que ves es por la fuga de arriba. When does the bus leave for Cancún? ¿Cuándo sale el camión para Cancún? We were walking along the sidewalk when I saw it. Estábamos caminando por la acera cuando lo vi. What did they charge for each one? ¿Cuánto te cobraron por cada uno? The water is not for drinking. El agua no es para beber. Thanks for not telling her. Gracias por no decirle. He said it was over there. Dijo que estaba por allí. We waited for 1 hour. Esperamos por 1 hora. The book was written by my uncle. El libro fue escrito por mi tío. A table for the living room. Una mesa para la sala. It must be around here. Tiene que estar por aquí. I went to see it out of curiosity. Fui a verlo por curiosidad. I called to tell him the good news. Llamé para decirle las buenas noticias. Thanks for the invitation. Gracias por la invitación. I know you don't have much money, so I pay it for you. Sé que no tienes mucho dinero, así que lo pagué por ti. It's difficult to cross that street because of all the traffic. Es difícil cruzar esa calle por todo el tráfico. We had to drive for 3 hours to get here. Tuvimos que manejar por 3 horas para llegar aquí. For example, the speed limit is 60 kilometers an hour. Por ejemplo, el límite de velocidad es 60 kilómetros por hora. I need it for tomorrow. Lo necesito para mañana. It's cream for sunburn. Es crema para las quemaduras de sol. The damage is due to the storm. El daño es por la tormenta. I sang happy birthday for her. Canté feliz cumpleaños para ella. They stayed with me for 5 nights. Se quedaron conmigo por 5 noches. Do you have change for 200 pesos? ¿Tienes cambio por 200 pesos? He wrote it out of love. Lo escribió por amor. I need to earn more to pay my bills. Necesito ganar más para pagar mis cuentas. I'm studying a lot to pass the exam next week. Estoy estudiando mucho para pasar el examen de la próxima semana. Is this the medicine for your grandmother? ¿Esta es la medicina para tu abuela? It should cook for 2 hours. Debería cocinarse por 2 horas. These flowers are for you. Estas flores son para ti. I bought something for your new house. Compré algo para tu nueva casa. It's quite expensive for just one ticket. Es bastante caro para un solo boleto. The ink is for the printer. La tinta es para la impresora. We need more time to finish it. Necesitamos más tiempo para terminarlo. I can't study because of all this noise. No puedo estudiar por todo este ruido. The children washed the car for their uncle. Los niños lavaron el coche para o por su tío. How much did you pay for the cap? ¿Cuánto pagaste por la gorra? Food for the cat. Comida para el gato. I know what my mother wants for Christmas. Sé lo que quiere mi mamá para Navidad. Thanks for everything. Gracias por todo. They gave us a free bag for coming. Nos dieron una bolsa gratis por venir. I used to do the shopping for her when she was sick. Hacía la compra por ella o para ella cuando estaba enferma. I don't work for them now. No trabajo para ellos ahora. I don't know who it's for. No sé para quién es. I don't know what it's for. No sé para qué es. A dress designed by Versace. Un vestido diseñado por Versace. A dress by Versace. Un vestido de Versace. She's worried about her health. Está preocupada por su salud. A lot of people suffer from malnutrition. Mucha gente sufre por malnutrición. You have to fight for your rights. Tienes que luchar por tus derechos. She's very advanced for her age. Ella es muy avanzada para su edad. He's famous for his wealth. Es famoso por su riqueza. I take the medicine twice a day. Tomo la medicina 2 veces por día. Glasses for red wine. Copas para vino tinto. At last you're here. Por fin, estás aquí. Almost everyone in this town works for the same company. Casi todos en este pueblo trabajan para la misma empresa. It's warm for this time of year. Hace calor para esta época del año. They sell batteries for your watch. Venden baterías para tu reloj.